They teach little girls that curiosity is dangerous, but they never mention why the room was locked in the first place. Before we begin, you need to understand something. This story is older than Perrault's 1697 telling, older than the printed page. It has been whispered across centuries, retold in dozens of languages, reshaped by every culture that understood what it really means when a man tells his wife there is one place she must never look. In some versions, he is a nobleman, in others, a sorcerer. In some, his previous wives simply disappeared. In the oldest ones, their screams still echo in the walls, but the core remains the same. A wealthy man, a new bride, a forbidden room, and blood that will not wash away. They tell this story like it's a warning about curiosity, a warning about disobedience, a warning about women who ask questions they were never meant to ask. But that's not what this story is, because Bluebeard is not a monster in the forest. He is not a witch. He is not a beast hiding in the dark. He is a husband. He is wealthy. He is polite. He is respected. And the room he tells her not to open is not forbidden because it is dangerous. It is forbidden because it tells the truth. This is not a fairy tale about curiosity. This is a story about what happens to women when obedience is mistaken for safety. Let me tell you what the stories don't always say up front. Bluebeard's beard is not just blue, it is wrong. Unnaturally dark, iridescent like oil on water, like something stained. In some tellings, it's black-blue, the color of a corpse. In others, it shifts in the light, never quite the same shade twice. This is not a distinguishing feature. It is a warning written on his face, and everyone sees it. The neighboring families notice. The women recoil. Even the servants avert their eyes. But here's what the story makes clear. He has been married before, multiple times, and no one knows what happened to those wives. Some versions say they vanished. Some say they went to visit family and never returned. In the cruelest versions, Bluebeard himself says they left him, and people believe it because it is easier than asking questions. So when he proposes to a new woman, she is not ignorant. She is desperate. Bluebeard is often remembered for one detail, the locked room. But the real horror begins long before the door. It begins with the proposal. Bluebeard is rich. His house is vast. His wealth promises safety, stability, escape from poverty. And yes, his beard is strange, unnatural, unsettling. But the story tells us something important. People notice, they whisper, they hesitate, and still someone marries him. Because fear is easier to ignore when survival is on the line. In older versions of this story, marriage is not romance. It is relocation, ownership, transfer of power. A woman does not gain a home, she enters his, and once she crosses that threshold, the door closes behind her. The estate is isolated, miles from her family, surrounded by forests or high walls. No one hears what happens inside. That is not an accident. Bluebeard leaves the house. Business, he says. A journey. He will return in a few weeks. But before he goes, he gives her keys, not just one, but a ring full of them. Every door, every room, every cabinet, every chest, every locked space in this sprawling estate. He places them in her hand and tells her she is mistress of the house now. She may go anywhere, open anything, explore freely, except one. One small key, different from the others. Ornate or plain, depending on the version. Sometimes gold, sometimes iron, sometimes stained dark, as if it has been used many times before. And he tells her, "You may open anything you want, but not that door. The one at the end of the lowest corridor, or the top of the tower, or beneath the stairs. The location changes. The rule does not. This is framed as trust a test of her virtue, her obedience, her love. But listen carefully. If this were trust, there would be no punishment. If this were love, there would be no trap. This is not permission. It is a setup. Because the one thing he forbids is the one thing he ensures she will think about. He does not lock the room and keep the key. He gives her the key and tells her not to use it. Psychologically, this is brilliant. Ethically, this is sadistic. The key is not freedom. It is surveillance. It is proof. And in some versions of the tale, there is another detail that makes this worse. He tells her friends to visit. He invites them himself. Come, he says, keep her company while I am gone. And her friends come, and they see the wealth, the luxury, the keys, and they ask her, "Why do you look so afraid?" And she cannot say. Because how do you explain that generosity feels like a noose? She opens it, but let's be clear about why. In some versions, she waits days, in others, hours. In the darkest ones, she opens it the moment he is gone, not because she is reckless, but because she already knows. Her body knows. The servants will not meet her eyes. The house is too quiet. There are rooms that smell like iron and lie. There are floorboards that creak differently in certain halls, as if the wood remembers weight it should not have carried. And when she finally descends those stairs, or climbs that tower, or unlocks that cellar door, the hinges do not creak. They have been used recently, and behind the door, there are no monsters. There are no intruders. There are no enemies. There are women who entered this house the same way she did. Women who were given the same keys. Women who were told the same rules. In some versions, they hang from hooks on the wall. In others, they are piled in a corner. In the most visceral ones, they are arranged, like he wanted to remember them. Their jewelry still on. Their wedding dresses still white, now red. Marriage was the hallway. The room was the end. And the blood on the floor does not shock her as much as the realization. This house has been quiet for a reason, because screaming in a place this isolated is just another kind of silence. And here is the detail that will haunt you. In some versions of the tale, she recognizes them. The women from the village, the ones who left, the ones people stopped asking about. One of them might have been her friend. The key will not clean. No matter how much she scrubs, no matter how much she prays, the stain remains. Because this is not a magic object, it is a metaphor. You cannot unknow what you know. And Bluebeard never intended her to survive curiosity. He needed proof not for himself, but for justification. So when he returns, he doesn't say, "I wanted to kill you." He says, "You disobeyed." This is how violence hides behind morality. Bluebeard does not rage immediately. He inspects, he asks questions he already knows the answers to. And then he tells her, "You brought this on yourself. If you had trusted me, if you had listened, if you had stayed where you belonged." This is the most important line in the story, even when it isn't written. Because the punishment was never about the door, it was about control. She begs for time. Not forgiveness, not mercy, but time. Just 15 minutes, she says. Time to pray. Time to prepare her soul. And he grants it, because he is in no rush. He has done this before. She runs to the highest window, the tower, the place where she can see the road. And she calls to her sister, Sister Anne, do you see anyone coming?" This refrain appears in nearly every version. Desperate, repetitive, increasingly frantic. I see nothing but the sun making dust and the grass growing green. Time is running out. She asks, again and again. And finally, Sister Anne sees them. 2 riders, her brothers, coming fast. This is where the story becomes brutally honest. She is not saved by love. She is not saved by reason. She is not saved by truth. She is saved because men with weapons arrive. Her brothers kill Bluebeard. They cut him down in his own house. His blood joins the blood already on the floor. And the story ends there, as if justice has been served. But notice something chilling. The wives in the room are still dead. And here's what the tale does not say. How did her brothers know to come? In some versions, she sent word before Bluebeard left a letter, a secret message. She knew. She knew what would happen if she opened that door. She knew what would happen if she didn't. And she made sure someone was coming because survival was always going to require violence. The story does not celebrate this. It simply states it. You cannot reason with a man who has built a room for your body. Now let's talk about what this story actually is. Bluebeard belongs to a category folklorists call ATU 312. The Maiden, Killer. It appears across Europe, Asia, Africa. Sometimes he is a demon, sometimes a sorcerer, sometimes just a man. But the pattern is always the same. A woman enters a house, she's given a test, she's meant to fail, she discovers proof of previous victims, she's marked by that knowledge, she survives only through external intervention. This is not a story about curiosity. This is a blueprint. In medieval and early modern Europe, women had almost no legal power within marriage. A husband could not be charged with raping his wife. He controlled her property, her body, her freedom to leave. Domestic violence was not called violence. It was called discipline. And if a woman died under mysterious circumstances, the investigation was often none. Bluebeard was never a warning about curiosity. He was a warning about marriage without power, about homes where rules matter more than lives, about men whose respectability protects them, about violence that happens quietly, legally, politely. The story survived because women recognized it. They told it to each other in metaphor because saying it plainly was dangerous. You could not stand in the village square and say, "Men kill their wives, and no one stops them." But you could tell a fairy tale about a man with a blue beard, and every woman listening would understand. Fairy tales were not bedtime stories. They were survival records. And here is the most chilling part. The story was sometimes told as a cautionary tale, but not the way you think. In some versions, the moral is, she should not have opened the door. This is the version that survived in print, the version approved by male editors, the version that protects the structure. But in the oral traditions, the ones told by women to women, the moral is different. She opened the door, and she lived. The ones who obeyed are still in that room. The most terrifying part of Bluebeard is not the blood. It is that no one stopped him until the bodies were undeniable. The room was always there. The door was always locked. And everyone knew. His previous wives did not simply vanish into thin air. People asked where they went. People noticed the absence. But they accepted his answers. They had to. Because the alternative, that a wealthy, respected man was murdering women in his own home, was too uncomfortable to say aloud. So they let the question die, the way they let the women die. This story does not ask, why did she open the door? It asks, how many doors stayed closed because women were told obedience was safer than truth? And how many rooms are still locked today? Listen, the next time someone tells you there is a place you are not allowed to look, ask yourself, what are they hiding? And who built that room?